Welcome back, Blue Porpoise here, and we are continuing with our Garmin G3000. I guess we can call this a series now, featuring the amazing HJet from Marwan Garib. Hope I'm saying your name right, Marwan. Please forgive me if I'm not. As many of you know, he's recently put out a amazing update for the aircraft. I will say that before this update, this aircraft was in the running for being my favorite aircraft in sim. I will say after the update, it is no contest. This is now my favorite aircraft in the sim currently. It's just done that well. Today's video, we're going to be covering area navigation and required navigation performance, or RNAV and RNP approaches, and we're going to be doing one into Hilton Head, South Carolina. Now, our buddy Cargolux Pilot has already done an amazing video covering this. I'll put the link either in the descriptions or maybe it's here on the screen if I figured out how to do that. And I also know that our buddy Willie did an amazing video covering VNAV descents along with ILS approach into LaGuardia. That was a very well made video too, and hopefully that link is showing up on the screen right now. If it's not, it's definitely in the description, so please make sure you go check out both of those videos. Today's video is going to have some things pulled out from both of those videos, so we'll be doing a VNAV descent, and obviously we'll also be doing an RNAV/RNP approach. The biggest difference between this video and their videos is that this is also going to be utilizing the in-game ATC. So I know a lot of guys have a love-hate relationship with the in-game ATC. In other words, some guys love to use it. Most guys seem to hate using it. I'm actually in the former group. I actually really like to use the in-game ATC. Other than when I'm flying the helicopter around the sim, I'm pretty much always using the ATC, and even then, sometimes I'm using it. But it does leave a lot to be desired, if you will. And it can definitely get in the way when you're doing your stars or your RNAV approaches. So the purpose of today's video is I really wanted to kind of help you guys highlight some things that you can do to actually get the ATC to work with you instead of against you, especially if you're doing an RNAV approach. Today I'm not doing a star into Hilton Head. I'm just doing the RNAV. So real quick, this airport that I decided to fly into, Hilton Head, is a very, very good scenery. You can get it over at flightsim.to. It's freeware. It is one of my favorite airports to fly into. It's a very challenging airport to fly into, in that even though this says it's a 5,000 foot runway, today we'll be coming in on runway 21. You only really have 4,600 feet to work with. And you'll see on approach, I mean, it doesn't look long at all. This is a very short runway. I love flying all my business jets in here. I love flying the CJ here. I love flying the Longitude here. And when I got the HJet on the very first day, I did my delivery flight from Greensboro to Hilton Head. So it's only natural that today's video, that's where we're going to go into. I've already recorded the actual flight, so it'll just be you and I talking, kind of doing a voiceover narration of what's actually going on in the video. In the video, we do a RNAV to runway 21, so we'll be descending here to our initial approach fix of Fuma. Once we intercept the approach or RNAV here, we'll continue down to Jam, where we'll get on our glide path and have a very interesting approach into Hilton Head. And I say interesting because we get smacked with a nice little gust of wind at about 300 feet above the deck. And anybody who's flown into Hilton Head knows that's not a very fun experience, especially when you're already looking at a very short runway. In fact, I also think, now I think about it, I believe we actually intercept the glide path up here at 1,900 feet. I don't think we ever actually descend to 1,800 feet. I'll have to see once we get into the video. And on topic of glide paths, I know a lot of guys have been having some issues with intercepting glide paths on their RNAV approach. And I know it can be super frustrating, especially if you've done a 2-3 hour flight and then you do an RNAV approach perfectly. VNAV did everything, and then you get to your last point and there's no glide path. Right? Well, I want to highlight some things here on the table that could help you with these situations, especially for the guys that aren't really familiar with how to read these charts. If you look right down here, you have a ground speed versus vertical speed comparison table that basically gives you, based on your given ground speed, what your vertical speed needs to be to achieve the glide path angle to get you down at the runway when you get to your intercept point. So if you're at 1,800 feet here and you get to jam and there's no glide path indication, you know that at jam doing 120 knots, you need to start heading down at about 660 feet per minute. Once you start heading down, you may find that the glide path might pop up on you somewhere down here. I've had that happen numerous times. Or it may remain up here. You know, it just depends on whatever's causing the issue. But you at least have some kind of data here that will tell you, okay, based on your ground speed, here's the vertical speed you need to be at when you're intercepting your glide path or / glide slope, because this table is also available for ILS approaches. The Honda Jet is usually in this realm of speeds, ground speeds, if you will, on approach, so about 100 to 120. So you know your vertical speeds for this particular approach will be between 550 and about 660 feet per minute. So I just wanted to point this out to you guys. I know many guys already know this here, but I know there's a few people that don't, and I hope that will help. So without further ado, we are going to get to the video now, and I'll have the chart pulled up for you. You'll see the aircraft falling as we go along. So I hope it helps. Let's get to the video. And just like that, we are back. So first thing I'm looking at before we start our descent is that blue line in front of our aircraft on the VSD. That blue line is indication of what your current pitch is. I also use that blue line to kind of judge when I want to ask ATC to start heading down. That's right. One of the first things that you have to start getting accustomed with doing is being prepared to ask for a lower altitude if for some reason the in-game ATC decides to keep you up high, but your VNAV profile is saying, hey, it's time to start going down low. So I'm not of the camp of setting and forgetting your VNAV. I use that blue line right there to kind of judge when I'm going to turn it on. One of the things I will do in aircraft in preparation for asking for a lower altitude is I'll go ahead and input the actual altitude that I want to request. So we all know the in-game ATC will usually give you a maximum descent increment of 10,000 feet. So the first altitude level off point, if you will, that I'll ask for will be 20,000 feet. And you'll see me dial that in here in a couple seconds. So if I wanted to go all the way down to 1,900 feet, I would ask for 20,000 feet, then I would ask for 10,000 feet, and then I would ask for 1,900 feet. or 2,000 feet, until we were close enough for them to give us clearance to the RNAV. Now, some people would already have VNAV armed at this point. Like I said, I do mine pretty much as close to top of descent as I can get it. Go ahead and set 20,000 feet. So I'm still waiting. I have heard nothing from ATC, so I'm prepared to start going down at any moment here. Just when I said, okay, we're pretty much close enough, I am about to hit number 4 there and ask for a decrease of 10,000 feet. Then this happens.
HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet, contact Jacksonville Center on 132.5. Good day.
You can't make this stuff up,
132.5 for HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet. Jacksonville Center HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet, flight level 300.
HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet, Jacksonville Center, continue to checker as planned. HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet, descend and maintain 17,000 feet.
But at this point, I can
descend
see that
and maintain
I'm at top of descent,
17,000
so
feet. HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet.
And we are but a couple seconds away from actually intercepting it. You'll see the blue line on the VSD in front of the aircraft slowly start descending down to the profile of the descent, and that is when you'll see it turn magenta as it just did, which means we've just now intercepted the profile and we are on a VNAV profile for this descent. Now at this point I messed up. I should have put 16,800 feet in. That way the aircraft would not level off and ATC would give us a further descent instruction, therefore allowing us to stay on the VNAV profile. You'll see my mess up here in a minute. So we are a little lower now. We are descending through flight level 180. I'm pulling up the status page here because I like to verify that the recognition lights activate when passing through 18,000 feet. There they go. Okay, so pay attention to what happened due to my mess up. Like I said, at this point I should be still descending down to about 16,800 feet. Right there. So VNAV disconnected, we're starting to level off. As you can see, the VNAV indicator is dropping below me. If I would have 16,800 feet in here right now, I'd still be on profile.
722 Hotel Juliet, descend and maintain 9,000 feet.
I would have got that instruction.
Descend and maintain 9,000 feet. HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet.
I would not have had to hit VNAV again and do this big dive we're doing right now to get back on profile. Now the reason I say descend to about 16,800 feet or about 200 feet below what you were instructed, well, sometimes ATC will actually want you to remain at the altitude that they give you. In those cases, If you're only about 200 feet below, it'll be really easy to go back to the altitude that you were instructed to stay at. So here we are putting in our speed bugs for the approach. I usually like to turn off the takeoff speed bugs. That way the only speed bugs being displayed are the landing ones. So right now we're continuing on down. The only constraint we actually have on this RNAV is a constraint to cross FUMA at 1900 feet. So I'm not really sure what the constraint is that the system put in itself. I don't know if that's a bug or not. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute. But just continuing the descent, I usually descend anywhere between 230 knots and 260 knots. Just checking which waypoint I'm flying to. And as you can see here, Checker has an actual really big constraint there on the VSD. Obviously that's not correct. Some pretty gnarly clouds out there. So if you look over there at the MFD, you probably can tell that FUMA is not on there. That was what I was talking about as far as the point is there. We're turning where we're supposed to be turning at, but for some reason it's just not labeled on this particular approach. Get bumped around a little bit as we get a little closer to this
HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet, contact Jacksonville Center on 120.85. Good day.
120.85 HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet. Jacksonville Center HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet is at 10,900 feet, descending 9,000 feet.
HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet, Jacksonville Center altimeter 30.08. Continue to check as planned.
So what I really appreciated about this approach is here in a second, air traffic control is going to give us our instructions for continuing on to the RNAV. That actually worked really well for me because as you can see, VNAV is about to level us off here. But it's nice because once we are clear onto the RNAV, we can descend directly down to 1900 feet at FUMA, which is the instruction that ATC will give us.
HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet, your tree 2 miles north. Descend and maintain 1,900 feet. Expect RNAV runway 21 approach via FUMA transition. Cleared to FUMA. HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet, your tree 2 miles north of Hilton Head. Contact Hilton Head Tower on 118.975 when inbound on the approach.
Tower on 118.975 HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet. Hilton Head Tower HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet, tree 0 miles north, inbound RNAV runway 21 approach.
HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet, Hilton Head Tower. Altimeter tree 0.08 wind 153 at 6. Cleared RNAV runway 21 approach.
Cleared RNAV runway 21 approach HondaJet November 722 Hotel Juliet.
So with that instruction, we are going to continue our descent onto the RNAV. We were originally cleared down to 1900 feet, but as you can see, I've dialed in 1800 feet, which is the lowest altitude constraint that I have on this particular RNAV approach. Now, one of the beautiful things about the VNAV is you can put the lowest altitude that you have on your approach, and as long as you're not giving any instructions from air traffic control, and as long as you put the constraints in correctly or they're being displayed correctly, VNAV will automatically level itself off at each constraint and initiate the next descent down to the following constraint. So in this case, even though I was cleared down to 1900 feet, I went ahead and put 1800 feet with the expectation that at FUMA we will have a quick level off, or we'll level off before FUMA at 1900 feet, and then continue the descent down to JAM, which has an 1800 foot constraint. So the big thing to understand that I mentioned a couple minutes ago is when you are on a VNAV descent with ATC and they give you level off altitudes that do not correlate with your VNAV profile, just dial in a slightly lower altitude than the one that ATC gave you, and usually they'll send you right on down without you ever having a level off. So if you're descending to 17,000 feet, descend to about 16,700, and if you do that, you'll usually get your next altitude level off lower down, which will require no level off. You can remain in VNAV, and it's just one of those things that, you know, you won't make the mistake I made in this video here of leveling off and then having to hit VNAV again and then kind of diving back to get back on profile and all that. So I went ahead and pulled up the chart just to verify that I am on course to FUMA, since it's not labeled there on the MFD. And you can see the magenta aircraft flying towards the FUMA waypoint there. So we are doing great. We're on profile as far as the actual VNAV, and we are on profile as far as the LNAV. Now I'm starting to slow down here. I usually do my ILS or RNAV intercepts no faster than 210 knots. I believe in this case I'm actually going to slow it down to about 180 knots because we're going to be very close to our glide path intercept once we cross FUMA. So notice, pretty much after ATC gives you your final clearance for the RNAV approach, you're pretty much on your own as far as any further instructions for them. So in this particular case, I could continue down to 1,800 feet to get the glide path, but it actually works out in my favor remaining at 1,900 feet, as you'll see here in a minute. Now I'm slowing her down to 180 knots. I usually don't put my first notch of flaps out until 180. That's just to kind of prevent the ballooning from the extra lift that they create. You actually have a 200 knot limit for this first notch, so I usually take it down as low as I can to prevent the aircraft really jumping up on you. So there goes the first notch of flaps. So I was going to maintain 160 knots, but I realized how close we are to the actual glide path intercept point. So I decided to go ahead and start slowing her down, get her configured. Gear will be coming out, and then we will be selecting full flaps at about 140 knots. Now notice our position on the chart. At this point we should be descending down to 1800 feet. That's how I have it configured. However, VNAV kind of does something a little funny here. By the way, there goes my full flaps, and we are getting ourselves configured for our final approach. So at that point, VNAV just disconnected. For some reason, it wanted to level me off at 1900 feet. I don't know if you noticed that, but the glide path intercept was right there at our level. So I went ahead and armed the approach. And as soon as I armed the approach, lo and behold, we have glide path indications. Start heading down, intercept the glide path. We're actually on the glide path. You'll get the indication back here in a couple seconds.
HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet, wind 138 at 12. Cleared to land runway 21.
Cleared to land runway 21 HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet.
And as you can see, we now have our glide path indication indicating again. We're now on the glide path. You can see our runway off in the distance. So we've just been given our clearance from ATC. That's the last instruction they're really going to give us at this point. A couple things would either happen. Either you would get to jam and you would intercept the glide path, or you would get to Japan. You would get the jam and there'd be no glide path. At that point, you would refer to the chart and descend at the given vertical speed based on your ground speed, as I showed you. So to summarize what we've talked about, when descending on a VNAV profile with ATC, you may have to ask ATC for altitude reduction yourself. When you actually do start down, whatever altitudes they give you to level off at, you might want to put a couple hundred feet below that, just so you don't have any interruption between the next altitude restriction they give you and disconnecting VNAV from your descent profile. Also, be familiar with your glide path interception, where it's supposed to occur, what altitude you should be getting it at. If you don't receive it when you should, make sure you're familiar with the table that I pointed out to you on the charts. And make sure that you're prepared to arm your approach by hitting that approach button when the glide path starts centering, whether that's descending from the top if you're below it or coming up from the bottom if you're above it. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. Enjoy our approach. I do apologize for the stutters here. I didn't see it during the flight, but I think there was something going on with the recording here. So I do apologize for that. So thanks once again. If you have any questions, you can hit me up in the comment section or Discord. Take care, guys.
HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet exit runway when able. HJet November 722 Hotel Juliet contact ground on 121.1.
121.1 for HJet November 722 Hotel